and welcome to another Plain Truths, and this week we are going to be talking about the highways in the sky. Joining me, as always, is the legend that is Captain Al. Hi, Captain Al.
Hi, Matt. How are things?
Oh, very good, thank you. Yes, not entirely dissimilar to when we recorded last time, I'll be honest, but there we go. Now, listen, this is going to be sound like a ridiculously easy question for you, but one of those things that's always been in the back of my mind here. If, for example, I'm going to say London. So, say you were taking off in London, we can say London Luton if you prefer. If we're going to take off in, say, Luton, and we were off to Madrid. Is there like a prearranged or pre-agreed route, or can the pilot literally plan the route that he wants to take or she wants to take in order to get to Madrid?
Okay, well, I'm glad that you've chosen Luton there, because obviously one of the first things that we have to navigate is the M1, and then we've got do we go clockwise or anti-clockwise around the M25? That's the conundrum then. Okay.
I see what you did there, yes. Okay.
I digress. So, to go from London Luton to Madrid, we have to decide whether we're going to go VFR or IFR.
Okay, all
Visual
right.
flight rules or instrument flight rules.
Oh, okay.
So if we're going to go VFR, which would be predominantly the domain of light aircraft, you are navigating in sight of the ground with a map and a compass and a stopwatch or some sort of GPS device. And you will just basically go pretty much in a straight line if there wasn't controlled airspace to navigate around. If you're going to go IFR, instrument flight rules, then you have to comply with predetermined procedures. So when we leave Luton, I think most people will agree that Madrid is to the south of London. So we want to end up taking off and then heading to the south. Now, the runway at Luton is east-west. So we're going to have to make a turn in one direction or the other, depending on which way we depart. That will be determined by the wind on the day. So there are something called SIDs, Standard Instrument Departures, and they are prescribed routes that will take you off a given runway to a given navigation point that will feed you, roughly speaking, in the direction you want to go. So we want to go southbound. So we would file in our flight plan a departure that will take us to a southbound navigational point. And then that joins us up with the airways network that is all around the world. And these are effectively highways or motorways in the sky. And these are routes that we will follow to get from London to Madrid. Now, it's fair to say that relatively speaking, they're designed to take you from major city to major city in much the same way as highways are. But obviously, one of the things that we have to do is we have to account for people coming in the opposite direction. So we will have some highways, some airways that are bi-directional, and some that are single direction, so northbound only, southbound only. So once we've joined up with the airways system, we will go through the airways, and then we have to have some mechanism to be streamed into Madrid, because Madrid's in the middle of Spain, so aircraft will be arriving from the north, the south, the east, and the west, and all points in between. And quite clearly, air traffic control needs some sort of way of organising this so that we just don't all arrive together and fight it out to see who can get their towel on the deck chair first. So we have something called a standard terminal arrival route, a star. So from our airways, we will join a star that will then take us to our landing runway. So that's how that works. Now, we've become quite advanced in Europe. So a lot of countries now, rather than having to fly these airways, will basically clear you from one point on their border to the point where you leave their airspace. So it's called free airspace. So it's a lot more direct than it was in the past. So we're spending less time in the air. It's more efficient. And the reason that they're able to do this, of course, is because these airways were all designed in a period of time before radar was common. Obviously, we had radar in the Second World War, but within civilian aviation use, it's become a relatively modern phenomena. So to give you an example, if we were to fly a little bit further and go down to the Canary Islands, we might fly through the airspace of Morocco, so speak to Casablanca control. And it's only in the last 5 years that they've had radar there. So when I say it's a relatively modern thing, the invention goes back a long time, but the implementation of it is still relatively modern. There are large parts of Africa without radar. So where we have radar and good radar coverage, we've able in recent years to instigate this free airspace, which makes it more efficient for airliners to fly. It's a much straighter line. Traditionally, there are many ways of getting from London to Madrid. So logically, you might think, okay, well, we take off from London, turn south. Okay, well, we've got Heathrow and Gatwick down there, so we've got to be slotted through there. So we'll typically head towards sort of Southampton on the south coast of the UK, chunter down to the west of Paris, head down towards sort of Toulouse, a quick cross of the Alps into Spain, or maybe a little bit further west and across the Cantabrians, and attack Madrid from the north. That's fine, and there are a number of routes that will do that. If it's the summer, then French air traffic control may well be on strike. So it's maybe necessary to go a different route. So there are airways that will take you out of London, head west towards either the southwest coast of Wales or down towards Land's End. Then you continue to fly out west until you reach Southern Ireland. Then you'll do a hard left turn down to the south, avoiding all of France, and then sort of attacking Spain from the bit where it adjoins Portugal. Now, that obviously adds to the flight time, but when the French are on strike, that's a necessity. So I don't know if you can use this expression anymore. I know you'll be bracing yourself, but there is more than one way to skin a cat.
Right. Okay. And just a pro of nothing really. So, I mean, who sets the highways of the skies? Is this were these sort of like predetermined routes that go back over years, or was it like agreed routes with airlines or?
They many of the airways within the UK go back certainly to the 1930s. And there were probably about 10 or so airways at that point, and they were given colours. There was amber was one, so amber 25, which is the one that goes down through Wales. And as time has gone on, they're all numbered. So, becomes Upper November 827, for example. Some of the airways off the coast of Ireland are Tango routes, so Tango 9, Tango 12, Tango 14, Tango 16. And they are typically put together by the state who own that airspace. So the UK will plan their airways, but of course we're part of a bigger network, which is Eurocontrol. And so lots of people spend inordinate amounts of times in offices planning these routes. And I don't have a chart to hand, but if I was to show you a paper chart, it is just a mass of lines.
Right.
There are so many airways across Europe. But of course, we are quite an interconnected continent.
Wow. I mean, there's so many things that you take into consideration, I suppose, as just a humble passenger. The planning and stuff involved. And I had heard stories of people, for example, because of we'll say an incident going on in France, like striking, for example, where you then got to avoid. But also, I mean, presumably those same rules apply. For example, where I think was it in Iceland where we had volcanoes erupting and things like that. And obviously that airspace then has to be avoided, presumably taking
Yes.
different routes as a result.
We can do volcanic ash in another episode if you like, but yes, absolutely right. Where there are concentrations of volcanic ash, then that airspace is effectively closed. So there has to be ways of getting around that. So you're absolutely right. Sometimes the routings from A to B are far from a straight line. They're not logical, but quite often they're a result of capacity issues. So say, for example, if a new air traffic control system is being installed, let's just say, just pick somewhere. Let's just say in Hungary, in Budapest. So Budapest is quite central within Central Europe. A lot of flights will fly through Hungarian airspace on their way down to Turkey and Asia, and obviously a lot of East-West Europe flights. So if the air traffic controllers are having a new computer system there, they obviously need time to learn it, get used to it. So initially they won't be able to operate as the same number of flights as they would do normally. So they will reduce their capacity, which means that the airways through Hungary have the ability to take less aircraft, so they become congested. So therefore the airways around that area of Europe will take up the burden, so they become more congested. You can kind of see the domino effect. And within Europe, you will probably be familiar with the fact that COVID-19 aside, during the summer, there will be air traffic control slots. These are calculated takeoff times, a small window of time that you have to be airborne in. And this is basically the Eurocontrol system looking at your flight, comparing it with all of the other flights around Europe that are using the airways that you're on, and trying to basically manage the capacity across the airways and the air traffic control units such that we don't end up with too much in the way of airborne holding, and we don't end up with sector saturation, which is basically too many aircraft for the controller to deal with.
So, and it's the controller essentially that sets the separation between you and other aircraft, if you like. So what's happening there when you're in cruise, for example? Who's keeping an eye on who's where then?
That's air traffic control.
Okay, right. So you're in contact with air traffic control the whole time, somewhere in the world.
Yeah. Well, if we contain it to the modern world, shall we say? So throughout Europe, we have good radar coverage. Throughout the northern part of Africa, there is fairly good air traffic control. Once we get into the middle of Africa, air traffic control becomes a bit more patchy, in so much as, in theory, it exists, but communications are very difficult. We're talking about countries that may be in civil war. We're talking about countries that don't have much investment in their infrastructure. So we typically communicate with VHF radio, and sometimes it's very difficult to communicate with air traffic control because either there's no one there, or their equipment is so poorly maintained that we can't hear them or they can't hear us. So in large swathes of Africa, aircraft will speak to each other on a dedicated frequency, and what you will do is you will plot the position of aircraft around you and form your own separation, if you like. So we will fly off the airway or above or below the airway to increase separation. But in the majority of the Western world, it's air traffic control who are providing the separation. So it may be by radar. So that would be the case across Europe, most of the United States. In areas where there isn't radar, so for example, across the oceans, so the North Atlantic, the South Atlantic, there isn't radar coverage. They will use something called time-based separation. So if you have an aeroplane that flies at, let's just say, zero 0.8 Mach, so zero 0.8 of the speed of sound, and 10 minutes later you have a second aircraft that also flies at the same speed, logically, when they reach the other side of the Atlantic, they will be 10 minutes apart because they've maintained the same speed. So when you're flying across the Atlantic, you will fly a constant speed, a constant Mach number, so it's time-based separation. And also then they apply lateral separation, so you're not bumping into each other, if you like, because there is no radar. But there is air traffic control. It's just that they use a different form of separation. So over land, it would be typically radar. So the blips are separated by the guy who's looking at the upturned dustbin lid. And
that's a technical term, right?
It is, yeah. And they will provide the separation, because whilst we have these airways, air traffic controllers will take aircraft off the airways to try to give them shortcuts, or to increase separation, or to reduce their workload. So we're not trains. We're not stuck to the rails. The airways are a planning structure, but quite often you will receive shortened routings, revised routings, shortcuts, because if the air traffic controller is in a position to give you a shortcut, even if it takes you into adjoining airspace. So, for example, if you're flying, as I mentioned earlier, across Hungary, and your route then takes you through Romania, and then down towards Turkey, the Hungarian controller will speak on the telephone to the Romanian controller and say, we've got, Sky 123, can I clear him to your boundary point? And the controller will go, yes, I'm quiet. So the Hungarian controller will clear you not to his boundary with Romania, but clear you to the boundary of Romania and the next country.
Wow. Okay. I mean, it's such a complicated. Again, it's one of those things you don't really sort of think that. I know it would be complicated, if that makes sense, but there's so much planning involved that you don't take into consideration as a humble passenger.
There is a lot of planning, and we can certainly look at planning for a future episode. So there's a lot of planning. Suffice to say, it's all done by computers these days. Yeah. Because when we're looking at Europe, there are all of the routes that are available, but they're not available necessarily 24/7. Some are only available in the evenings, at night time. Some are only available at the weekends. So there is a document called the route availability document. So the computer systems will look at this and see what routes are available. Then it will look to see what delays are incurred by using these routes, the slots. And it will do a balancing act between whether it's better to fly a more fuel-efficient route and incur a 10-minute delay, or whether it's better to do a longer route but with less delay. So it becomes quite complicated. And there is a misnomer from the general public that when we're sat in the cruise, nothing is happening. The autopilot's flying. Yeah. But we're continuously modifying our route. We're trying to get you from A to B quickly, so we'll be proactive in trying to get shortened routings, and of course that's before we've even got onto the subject of avoiding weather, because weather will intervene in any plans of man or mouse.
Indeed, absolutely. Well, there's a couple of great topics there that I think we need to come back to, but for now, Captain Al, thank you.
It's a pleasure.
If you'd like to watch more from our great series, then you can do that by pressing here. We've also created you a playlist with all the Plain Truth episodes, and you'll find that just here. Why not like and subscribe to our channel? That way you will be notified whenever we post our great content. Or if you've got a question that you'd like Captain Al to answer, then why not pop it in the comments box below, and you may well feature on an upcoming episode of The Plain Truth.